Last summer, outside a McDonald's in the middle of Georgia, a 12-foot alligator stopped traffic in a place wildlife officials say it was never supposed to be able to live. The city is Macon, Georgia, dead center in the state, more than an hour's drive from the nearest coastline. On an ordinary summer afternoon, a crowd gathered in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant to watch something that, by the official range maps, should not have been there at all. A 12-foot American alligator sunning itself calmly in the open, drawing a swarm of onlookers, cell phones, and a flurry of calls to local authorities. Some residents even tried to catch it themselves before wildlife officers arrived. It was not the only one. It was, local news would report, just the latest in a string of sightings that had been climbing across central Georgia all summer. To understand why that alligator should not have been there, you have to understand the line drawn across the state a long time ago, not by a person, but by the weather itself. Biologists call it the fall line, a natural geological boundary running roughly through the cities of Columbus, Macon, and Augusta, marking the point where the soft coastal plain gives way to harder, colder ground to the north. For as long as alligators have been studied in Georgia, the fall line has also marked something else, the edge of where they can survive. South of it, warm wetlands and mild winters. North of it, cooler temperatures that, according to the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, prevent alligators from successfully reproducing at all. The species' entire established range in the state has always sat along and south of that line. North of it was supposed to be empty. The Georgia Department of Natural Resources has now confirmed something researchers were not expecting to measure so soon. Alligator reports from counties that sit outside the historically established range have climbed by 22%, and the animals are no longer confined to isolated wanderers. In 2022 alone, wildlife officials captured and relocated more than 400 alligators from residential areas in parts of the state that had previously seen almost no incidents at all. That is not a handful of strays. That is a pattern large enough for the state to build an entire response system around. Kara Nitschke is the state's official alligator biologist, and she has spent her career watching this exact boundary. When asked directly whether the alligators are simply becoming more visible because more people are moving into the areas they have always lived in, or whether the animals themselves are actually pushing north, she did not rule out the second explanation. As temperatures continue to rise, she said, alligators will be able to keep creeping upward. She could not rule out that they are already doing exactly that. Move north from the fall line into Tennessee, into Virginia, into North Carolina, and the exact same pattern is showing up in the scientific record. Research published in the journal Scientific Reports found that average winter temperatures across parts of Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee have risen by approximately 1.5 degrees Celsius over the past 50 years. That may sound small. For a cold-blooded reptile, whose entire survival depends on whether it freezes to death in a hard winter, it is the difference between a habitat that kills it and a habitat that does not. The thermal boundary that once stopped alligators cold, quite literally, has been sliding north for half a century, and it is still sliding. States like Tennessee and Virginia, which had no historical need for alligator management policy of any kind, have now had to build one because the animals arrived before the policy did. In Arkansas, On the opposite side of the Alligators range, wildlife officials have documented the same northward creep, with confirmed sightings now reaching counties that sit far outside the traditional boundary, the animals following major river systems deeper into the state than anyone expected them to survive. Researchers at the University of Georgia's Savannah River Ecology Laboratory are now running climate and ecological models specifically to project how much further this expansion could go, using winter temperature trends and habitat availability to try to predict a map that keeps redrawing itself faster than the last version can be published. There are two competing theories, and both of them are backed by real data, which is exactly why this remains unresolved. The first theory is the simpler one. People are moving into alligator habitat that has existed for decades, not the other way around. Central Georgia has grown rapidly. New subdivisions push into wetlands and pond systems that alligators have quietly occupied for years, and what looks like a sudden invasion is really just more human eyes finally watching the same water the animals were always in. Under this theory, nothing about the alligator has changed, only the number of people around to see it. The second theory is the one that should make you look twice at every farm pond and golf course water hazard north of the coast. Under this theory, the alligators are not just being noticed more, they are actually expanding their range generation by generation as warming winters open new territory that used to be lethal to them. Milder winters mean fewer hatchlings dying in cold snaps, more man-made reservoirs and retention ponds built for suburban development create exactly the still, warm water an alligator needs to thrive. And rivers, like the ones in Arkansas, give young alligators a highway to travel along, carrying the population steadily further from the coast than any range map currently shows. Nitschke herself, the person with more direct data on this than almost anyone in the state, would not choose between the two theories when asked directly. People moving in, people encroaching on habitat, people being more vigilant and simply noticing animals that were always there, she said, that is likely part of it. But she also said, in the same breath, that she could not rule out that the alligators are simply making their way north on their own. The scientific consensus researchers keep returning to is this: whether the driving force is climate, habitat, human movement, or all three at once, the practical result is the same. Wildlife agencies across the entire Mid-South, in states that spent generations with no alligator policy whatsoever, are now writing rule books in real time. Distinguishing a genuinely new breeding population from an escaped pet or a single wandering individual is, by the researchers' own admission, extremely difficult, and many of the reports crossing agency desks right now remain unconfirmed, anecdotal, a photograph and a phone call rather than a verified nest. But the sightings that have been verified are enough to keep the models running, enough to keep the range maps under constant revision, and enough that a 12-foot alligator can now stop traffic outside a fast food restaurant in the exact center of a state where, according to the official maps, it should never have been able to survive at all. Tell me in the comments if you have ever seen an alligator somewhere you did not expect one, and how far from the coast you were. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. There is more coming.